The Great Depression. Ah, those were the days when the rich embraced their inner minimalists with a fervor that made Marie Kondo look like an amateur, while the rest of the world was perfecting the art of turning old newspapers into haute couture furniture. The wealthy were discreetly indulging in their splendid little quirks and luxuries. Picture this: a lavish mansion on the outskirts of a bustling city, where the lines between fantasy and reality blurred just enough to make life interesting. The proprietor, an eccentric tycoon with a penchant for imported European cheeses and an impressive collection of mismatched socks, sailed through the economic typhoon with a grin that seemed to say, "Depression? What depression?" Our journey begins in the heart of one such grand estate, where an impeccably polished butler set down a delicate porcelain teacup filled with a rare blend of tea that had somehow escaped the notoriety of rationing. The aroma was so exquisite, it could lure a sleep-deprived dragon to nap, and here it was, reserved for breakfast alongside a miraculously unending supply of freshly imported croissants. As the city grappled with breadlines, the butler gently opened the window to a private garden, an Eden of calming symphony, orchestrated by untroubled birds and bees who seemed to have missed the memo about the nationwide crisis. Within this secluded paradise, exotic plants flaunted their vibrant blooms, each one a testament to the family's quest for the exuberantly unnecessary. Shall we peek into their little secret? It turns out that even in the darkest of times, some had contrived to maintain a steady influx of frivolities through a network of equally whimsical suppliers. These were individuals whose imagination for shipping routes rivaled epic novels, their minds a labyrinth of ingenuity dedicated to sustaining the unusual preferences of their well-heeled clientele. Imagine, if you will, a hidden passageway in the mansion's library, a luxurious sanctum for a collection of absurdly immense books. These volumes were cherished not for the wisdom they imparted, but for their sheer size, providing perfect propping for portraits of ancestors draped in finery that rivaled tabloid celebrities of centuries gone by. Their conspiratorial grins suggested an awareness of the absurdity their descendants embraced, a nod and a wink through the pages of history. But hush, listen closely, and you might hear soft, whimsical music waft through the halls, played on a grand piano that towered over the room like a decadent leviathan. Its keys were touched by fingers that somehow always found the humor in playing waltzes at 1/5 speed, a melody indulgently out of sync with the rapid world beyond those walls. Meanwhile, amidst the hum of opulence, a story was whispered through the halls about a butler who doubled as an amateur sommelier, his discerning palate ready to identify a slip in vintage from a continent away. He would serve wines that told tales of sun-drenched Italian hills and moonlit French vineyards, capturing sentiments more idyllic than the reality outside, each drop a reminder that some treasures are to be savored. Yet, as the family indulged in these bountiful offerings, the spirit of whimsy was laced with a quiet benevolence. For you see, when night descended and the world paused to dream, baskets of surplus delights were spirited away, in secret, to brighten the lives of those beyond the gate. It was a clandestine communion, born from an unspoken understanding that not all treasures need to be rivalries hoarded. If these stories help you drift off, please subscribe to the channel. It would mean the world to me. And before you fully fade into dreamland, I would love to know where you're listening from and what time it is there. The opulent estate settled under a sky brushed in twilight hues, harboring secrets as delicate as the fluffs of whipped cream that topped its nightly dessert. But as we nod towards slumber on this nostalgic journey, let us dream of elegance blending into laughter with the gentle abandon of a feather floating on a pool of history. Ah, the Great Depression, a time famed for breadlines, dust bowls, and a national vibe that could best be described as bleak chic. Yet amid the melancholy music of the era, punctuated by the soft shuffle of worn-out shoes across the sidewalks, there lay hidden pockets of excess so extravagant They could make Gatsby himself drop his monocle in disbelief. Picture a scene, if you will. Outside, the nervous ticker of a Wall Street clock echoes the urgency of a time where millionaires became paupers faster than you could say, stock market crash. But inside a lavish penthouse apartment high above the city, the atmosphere whispers a very different story. Here, amidst the gentle glow of candlelight, a small gathering of society's elite indulges in a peculiar ritual. They're not examining stock portfolios, but something far more precious and audibly satisfying: the popping of imported champagne corks, fizzing outside their bottles like miniature dexterous fireworks. This is where we encounter one of our most peculiar luxuries, one that floated smugly overseas. During this era, imported champagne was as rare as a hopeful headline. For the incredibly wealthy, however, the yeasty aroma of a freshly poured glass was as essential as their morning newspaper, without the sorrowful headlines, of course. It helped them forget the crashing economy, at least until the morning hangover. But let's float away from the affectionate embrace of bubbly intoxication and glide into the realm of fabric, one so exquisite that calling it simply clothing would be like calling the Mona Lisa a decent doodle. Yes, I speak of custom couture. As the masses were fashionably donning potato sacks, those with rather less potato and more pocket were prancing about in Parisian styles that somehow wove fiscal caution into their lavish stitches. Exclusive designers secretly shipped opulent gowns masked as agricultural tools. Oh, the irony. Past scrutinizing customs officials, thus preserving society's most delicate secret, that even in destitution, there was delight in decadence. Now, let's wander into the gold-laden corridors of decadent distractions. For what's a luxurious life without a secret spa day or two? In opulent estates, hidden snugly away from public disdain, the wealthy gathered for clandestine beauty treatments. Think mud baths more luxurious than soothing, which allegedly contained rejuvenating elements capable of curing everything from crow's feet to outright social embarrassment. The ingredients whispered about in opulent circles were meticulously procured from the farthest corners of the globe, much like the finest fairy tale potions. Our exploration would be incomplete without a foray into the world of automotive enchantments, where cars could be clad with enough enhancements to make even James Bond's Aston Martin quietly envious. These were no mere vehicles. They were road yachts, luxuriant and excessive, humming gently along streets that had likely forgotten what a decent paint job looked like. Their chrome gleamed, a silvery promissory note declaring that even amidst an economic nosedive, someone, somewhere, could still afford a shiny new pair of wheels, or at least the appearance of forward motion. And woven through all this, much like the secret compartments of a luxury liner, one would find yet another oddity to treasure. Private jazz concerts, wherein the unmatched dulcet tones of unlisted performers filled rooms that may well have been gilded in soundproofing to protect the sacred sound from far less refined ears. These secret concerts allowed the wealthy to tap their troubles away into obscurity, assuming, of course, those troubles could even keep time. As the soft melody of our chapter sings its final verse, your eyelids grow heavy, softened by the thought of a time when even scarcity had its slices of opulence, its whispers of whimsy trailing like champagne bubbles in an upward flight. Soon, we shall adventure yet again, exploring other such curious corridors of history, inching ever closer to those secrets and stories steeped in both extravagance and irony. But for now, dear listener, let this calm you into that peaceful slumber, holding you softly until the next chapter unfurls its tale. As the world twirled into the economic downfall of the Great Depression, a peculiar yet delightful peculiarity came to light: the remarkable resilience of luxury. For the fabulously wealthy, of course. Oh yes, while the rest of the world was stressing over dimes and dodging dust storms, the affluent had found fascinating ways to pamper themselves in the most imaginative of manners. Picture, if you will, a sumptuous ballroom dripping in golden hues, not unlike a scene from a Gatsby-fueled fever dream, but set in the gritty heart of 1930s New York. Here, though the music was still jazz, the terms of extravagance had become a touch more creative. No longer could you impress society by merely rolling out of a new car. Instead, it was the secret societies of sumptuousness that became all the rage. Amongst the elite gossip circles, the most whispered about was none other than the secret society of decadent dining. Seemingly inspired by the Romans' elite, these clandestine dinners involved scandalously lavish feasts held in hidden compartments of luxurious hotels. The moneyed orchestrated evenings dedicated to delicacies that would make mere mortal mouths water. Imagine tasting imported olives, because domestic ones simply wouldn't suffice, and sipping wine that had aged more gracefully than the host himself. The clandestine nature of these dinners only added to their allure. Invitees arrived in black tie get-ups, meandering through service entrances and kitchen alleyways to avoid uninvited attention. A masquerade ball by entree and exit. The menu was as opulent as it was secretive, featuring caviar piled generously enough to build mini-castles, with lobster thermidor being the pièce de résistance. Meanwhile, in luxury linen napkins, secret messages were rumored to be exchanged, possibly stock tips, possibly mere compliments on the host's ability to procure smoked pheasant during a market closure. Revelries, however, were not constrained to sumptuous suppers alone. In Palm Beach, far from the gritty urban centers, a trend took flight amongst the rich with aviation envy. Yes, the Depression may have grounded many a deal, but not the haute set's desire to take to the skies in opulent style. Personal aircraft were worming their way into the hearts and wallets of the tremendously wealthy. These aerial lounges were fitted with bespoke interiors more at home in a drawing room than a cockpit. With enough in-flight refreshments and crystal decanters, these soaring sanctuaries boasted more than just the seats attached to their fuselage. They had style, captained by former bootleggers turned private pilots who could Tennessee waltz the night away quicker than they'd pour a glass of evening fizz. Yet, amidst the indulgence of elegant escapades and luxury-laden leisures, there existed an entirely different kind of secret society, the Swan Society of tranquil automobiles, notorious for their commitment to maintaining a man's beloved engine's purr during the clamorous clatter of economic crash. Yes, the swans. Not actual swans, you see, but dandy mechanics who could soothe even the fussiest Stutzbearcat or Pierce Arrow, enticing them back to their well-oiled whir. For an exorbitant fee, of course. These artisanal wizards of wrenches became saviors of the opportune, treating cranky carburetors to wild rides of once illicit gas, cleaning out their intricate valves with gentler hands than a mother bathing her babe. The cars, reanimated into glorious grumbling legends of the road, became proud works of mechanical artistry, roving exhibitions in a dust-filled world that mocked anyone else yearning for a soothing Sunday drive. In harvesting a slice of luxury from the practical mechanics of pressing oil and tweaking engines, the true currency of passion projects and secret successes, this chapter of opulence and craft poured a gentle glaze over an otherwise tough-crusted economy. Just one peek through the thick velvet curtain of high society in the Depression reveals that, while the general populace basked in early bedtimes and dreams of sunnier tomorrows, some lounged in plush, extravagant mantles, swirling in their very own concoctions of vintage forgetfulness. As the melodic sway of history continues to lull us into slumber, close your eyes on the glowing luster of secret feasts and surreal soirees. For the next tale beckons like a soft zephyr, gently wheeling us onward into mysteries anew where sleep softly bends between pages of forgotten fineries. Drift away, dear listener, as the hush of whispers dwindles into the night. In the shadows of the opulent past, when the Great Depression tightened its grip on the world like a dreary blanket, a select few continued to enjoy life's indulgences away from the prying eyes of reality. Welcome to a time when wealth was not just a safety net, but a secret so elaborate it could only be whispered in the hush of midnight corridors. Imagine, if you will, a sprawling estate situated on the very edge of what was deemed respectable society. an abode where time seemed to scoff at the hard-pressed calendar of the 1930s. Behind its ornate gates, a cascade of luxurious secrets unfurled like a well-planned souffle, fluffy, rich, and prepared to rise flawlessly above the economic despair. Our scene spotlights Lady Euphemia Worthington, a name that itself evoked the rustle of silken gowns and the clink of crystal goblets. Lady Euphemia, with her stately air and an apparent allergy to anything less than five-star, had transformed her seaside manor into a veritable Atlantis of opulence. While outside, lines of weary souls formed at soup kitchens, dispensing broth with more water than flavor, Lady Euphemia was hosting soiree where the only thing rationed was restraint. Now, don't let her name fool you into thinking she was a commonplace aristocrat. No, Lady Euphemia was a trailblazer in clandestine comfort, perpetually cloaked in an aura of audacious luxury. Her prized possession, an indoor fountain that spouted not water, but champagne, a bubbling testament to effervescence in both drink and spirit. Each night, as the world slumbered under a heavy heart, Lady Euphemia would summon her closest confidants to relish in this sparkling spectacle. The fountain purportedly ran with respectable caution, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, to observe some semblance of austerity, naturally. And as her small but exclusive court were gathered to toast to yesterday's excess and tomorrow's uncertainties, they pondered the irony of drowning their sorrows in a fountain of joy. But allow me to turn your attention to another fanciful delight of Lady Euphemia's manor. The hidden escape cloaked beneath layers of illusion, a cinema disguised as a library, a masterwork of contrived simplicity. Bookshelves that lined the walls held novels concealing reels of films, the kind that offered an escape from reality even more powerful than mere prose. Here, reclined on plush seats as velvet as Florentine aubergine, guests would be treated to cinematic wonders. All boundaries were blurred, as film ceased to be just film, becoming instead a vivid tapestry of dreams and stories, as enchanting as a fairy tale, whispered by the warm sea breeze. Titles teased relativity and rebellion alike. Scenes danced across the screen, while opulent shadows floated amongst the sleep-laden guests like a gentle lullaby, orchestrating their dreams. In this world of secret luxury, the kind that would make even the most diligent tax collector scratch his head, Lady Euphemia ensured the trials outside her estate never crossed the threshold. Whispered rumors amongst her close confidants spoke of a pantry stocked with exotic fruits, where pineapples stacked like edible crowns awaited a banquet that could rival the very best of mythological feasts. Yet, just beyond Lady Euphemia's gilded walls, where potent smells of citrus mixed with tidings of merriment, the sounds of the common world echoed faintly, a reminder of the lines dividing the luxurious from the frugal, the elite from the everyman. For at some places in history, secrets were less about concealment and more about preserving a sense of wonder amid the weariness of times. In the quiet that follows, allow yourself to drift into the contemplation of those bygone echoes, where hidden luxuries weaved into the tapestry of history continue to twinkle softly, promising that even amidst hardship, the human spirit finds solace in its capacity for both indulgence and hope. And with this gentle thought playing like a melody in the night, we tiptoe onward to uncover yet more clandestine comforts humming softly in history's quiet background. As the clock tick-tocked softly through the somber rooms of time, we find ourselves back on a whirlwind journey to an era often shrouded in sepia tones and collective hardship, the Great Depression. Today, we delve into the opulent pockets of history to uncover the curious case of how the wealthy managed to retain some surprising luxuries during those seemingly stark years. Picture this. While the average John and Jane Doe were tightening their belts tighter than an overzealous corset, the creme de la creme of society were engaging in a kind of secretive opulence that may have, perhaps, discreetly ruffled a feather or two. But let's not rush ahead, like a 1920s flapper, to the Charleston floor. Let's amble gently. For instance, take the curious case of Mrs. Estelle Asterbilt, Now, Estelle was a woman who knew her caviar from her beluga, even when faced with the constraints of economic doom. During this time, while most were contemplating substituting coffee with dandelion root, which is not as terrible as it sounds, provided you've already lost your taste for actual coffee, Estelle threw lavish soirees that were reportedly so extravagant they'd make Gatsby green with envy. You see, Estelle had a penchant for what some might consider necessary frivolities: tiger skin rugs, crystal chandeliers that threatened to outshine the sun, and pearls so lustrous that they could serve as an alternative light source. Yet her true secret extravagance, hidden beneath the layers of societal judgment, was perhaps the most subtle of luxuries: her personal ice cream parlor, imported directly from Italy. During an era when many struggled to put ice cubes in drinks, Estelle specialized in the most exquisite flavors, ensuring each guest had their own customized delight. Her rise to fame as the grande dame of dessert rightly earned her a reputation as a pioneer on the chilly peaks of gastronomic wealth. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, meticulous gentlemen were indulging in something rather quaint, yet distinctly elite: the sport of falconry. Yes, amidst crashing markets and counting pennies, those with ample resources found solace in recreating medieval escapades with birds more regal than the coats of arms from whence they hailed. Securing a noble falcon was seen as the ultimate status symbol, set only to be rivaled by the acquisition of a newfangled phenomenon: the automobile with a built-in car phone. Of course, such a device was less about efficiency and more about the rich flexing their nouveau communication muscles. Talk of a social call was certainly given a new twist. Now, let us glide seamlessly to the city that never sleeps: New York, an epicenter of dreams and dramas, where Howard, the industrious shipwright, took whiskey consumption to a daring level. Faced with prohibition, what was a well-to-do gentleman to do but construct a library? Not one for paperbacks or the musings of literary giants. No. This library's shelves were stocked with shimmering bottles of claret and scotch, just waiting to swirl in crystal tumblers. And because he was a humble man, or someone who feared both the taxation and judgment of heaven, Howard dubbed it his private study, just in case Uncle Sam decided to pay a visit. These various indulgences were not merely displays of wealth during a tough time. They became the pillars of forgotten culture, whispered about in hidden parlors and secret societies, representing a mosaic of lavish resilience against the dreary cadence of times. They were the exquisitely entitled footnotes in history's great tome, signifying that somehow, for those who could, life did indeed go on. As we let the strains of a bygone era lull us toward gentle sleep, we notice that just like a fine vintage wine, these luxuries matured even amid the clamor of adversity. And thus, with a hushed note of amusement, we take a delicate step back from this glimmering time capsule. But fear not, for there is more yet to reveal. Amidst the canvas of the Great Depression, where sepia-toned struggles painted the landscapes of human experience, there existed enclaves of serene wealth. Hidden behind ivy-clad walls and wrought-iron gates, the rich indulged in secret luxuries that danced like elusive daydreams through the imagination of those less fortunate. In these secluded paradises, the air was perpetually tinged with the delicate aroma of freshly brewed coffee, an aroma so robust and inviting that it would have convinced even the most steadfast of thrifty souls to loosen their Depression-era purse strings. Oh, and the coffee wasn't just any ordinary brew. No, it was a blend crafted from beans sourced from an obscure village perched on the perfect slope of a faraway mountain, kissed by the first rays of dawn each day. It was coffee that whispered of far-off lands and adventures yet to be had, while waking up the sleepy senses of its appreciators. Now, the ostentatious drinking vessels of choice for these caffeine escapades were no ordinary mugs either. Picture teacups so delicate they seemed to be embroiderings of air, adorned with gold filigree patterns that told the story of prosperity in quiet whispers. These cups clinked ever so softly, almost hesitantly, as if they feared breaking the spell of opulence surrounding them with each sip. Moving past the breakfast nook, where sunlight danced lazily off crystal chandeliers that were polished until they gleamed brighter than a starry night. The wealthy elite would drift into parlors lined with books, libraries of leather-bound volumes, each holding tales of forgotten epochs and words of power. Extra funds. The rooms themselves were like introverted scholars, seemingly snubbing the outside world's noises, offering only the mellow, seductive crackle of a fireplace, which added both warmth and an illusory aura of bibliography. As part of their daytime leisure, the affluent would gracefully glide across rooms in silk robes, with every fold and billow around them echoing the sound of wealth. These were the kind of garments that seemed too luxurious, even for casual lounging, whispering secrets stitched in beads of exotic pearls sewn by hands attuned to perfection. The sound of silk brushing together was akin to a gentle lullaby being hummed by time itself. Outside, far beyond the protective arms of sprawling gardens, where fountains sang songs of water, carefree and unchained, the less fortunate scrambled to make ends meet. Yet the rhythms of labor and desperation seemed a world apart from those opulent estates where joy was cultivated as their most prized plant. Of course, evenings unfolded in a continuation of lavishness as the rich found themselves ensconced in deep, velvet-upholstered armchairs by window seats overlooking the vast expanse of lands stretching to the horizon, a tapestry of ownership. The soft embrace of the armchair was as comforting as a warm embrace from an old friend, one who wove comfort into every fabric thread. As the clock ticked tirelessly towards midnight, the most theatrically luxurious indulgence would transpire, a private concert of one. Renowned musicians, shrouded in a mystique of fame, would perform to their audience of patrons within acoustically blessed chambers. These were spaces that seemed to bottle symphonies within their ornate ceilings, each note orchestrated like the ingredients of a lullaby, so potent it could send even the most alert night owl into a serene slumber. As the final note of music delicately took its bow, the evening would give way to silence. The inhabitants of these blissful castles would retire to chambers dressed as grand as the moonlit sky, where bedspreads spun from dreams themselves were draped gently. Sleep, like luxury, was a commodity that complied willingly, enveloping its host in calm tranquility. As they drifted into peaceful slumber, the world outside continued in hush. The quiet reflections on their good fortune did not escape the reaches of dreams. However, somewhere in the mix of sound and silence, the new dawn was just a lullaby chorus away, ready to unfurl its mystery and majesty to the privileged and pauper alike. But for now, as dawn waited for its cue, each inhabitant of the wealthy's world nestled into serenity, a cliffhanger, inviting us gently to explore the next chapter in which the tapestry of human spirit weaves further enchantments. Amidst the economic doom and gloom of the Great Depression, there existed a peculiar breed of individuals who seemed to waltz around life's hurdles with an almost magical flair. Picture, if you will, a peculiar man often found nestled high in a swanky penthouse in Manhattan, indulging in a ritual that defied financial catastrophe. Dingus Percival Weatherby III, a name so grandiose it sounded like a declaration of aristocratic intent each time it was uttered. Dingus Percival, or Percy for the more socially informal among us, was a man of peculiar tastes. While the world wrestled with breadlines, Percy wrestled with his daily existential dilemma. Ought the pâté be garnished with Siberian caviar, or perhaps just a modest, rare truffle shaved as delicately as birds' wings flutter? As a bastion of luxurious eccentricities, Percy made it his personal mission to preserve the art of leisurely excess. While most folks dodged drafts and desperately sewed patches to perpetually hole-riddled clothes, Percy would nonchalantly toss another log onto the ever-crackling fire in his grand library. This oak-shelved sanctuary was furnished with plush leather armchairs, each of which had gobbled up more needlework time than the local seamstress could even dream of. The sprawling fireside called for evening wear, in a fashion he claimed unsuitable for the general public, but perfect for the distinguished gentleman who desired to contemplate the intricate yet somehow indispensable philosophical musings over a snifter of the most golden brandy known to mankind, imported exclusively from who knows where. Our delightful Percy was joined by his social circle of equally audacious spirits of taste. Together, these gentlemen and gentlewomen adhered to the unspoken rule of thumb in dire times. When in doubt, throw a lavish Gatsby-inspired soirée that could make Daisy faint. For what better way to encourage economic recovery than by contributing heartily to the last remaining pretense of glamour, gold-leafing what little was left to leaf? The soirées were legendary, even by the elite's insatiable standards. Champagne flowed as free as imagination, and guests were entertained by sumptuously voiced opera singers imported from Europe, whose contracts apparently specified large quantities of quality piping bowls of venison stew. Percy indulged this peculiar quirk of culinary goldenness with a grace unknown to most soup kitchens of the era. Indeed, Percy and his ilk were habitually known to hunt the enormous game, though not in the wild depths of jungles, but rather amidst the hallowed marble floors of department stores, those whimsical cathedrals of consumer delight. There, Percy and companions adopted a new sport, competitive silk waistcoat acquisition, a clear testament to being a well-dressed survivor of fiscal storms. Many evenings were occupied with feigned complaints about the inherent existential difficulties of society, like how a butler lost his tie-pin, leading to a wonderful fright of insufficient collar rigidity. Naturally, this was a crisis requiring urgent panel discussions over tea, a tea that casually hinted at foreign exoticism and opulent aromas, freshly lifted from the first wave of scarce imports, daring enough to breach shores unmarred by fiscal restraint. Alas, while some found themselves within a cocoon spun by opulence, others crafted dreams out of thrift, a creativity that Percy took mild interest in, though ultimately regarded as theatre. For even life's vices must be seasoned with spice, however marginal. The creative elasticity of the general populace often provided fodder for afternoon musing, leaving Percy only with the most heartfelt of considerations. Should the chandelier over the ballroom receive another round of crystal updates, or will the guests never notice? In retrospect, Percy might argue that such preoccupations offered neural exercise critical to maintaining the delicate racket of absurd prosperity amidst widespread adversity, a dance that seemed rhythmically counterfactual against the backdrop of worldwide austerity, yet ticked in harmony. As the night chaperoned Percy's lily-white cravat into the early hours of dawn, where did this curious tapestry of splendor lead? With our eyelids growing heavier and the gentle hum of history whispering onward, we'll slip gracefully towards a tapestry we hadn't yet remarked, a quiet piece of the magnificent puzzle ever charmed away from the hum of gilded edges. In the world of clandestine opulence during the Great Depression, wealth was not just about having money, it was about a subtle mastery of the art of illusion. Deeply nestled against the crisis' somber backdrop, the lavish lives of the fortunate few embraced a curious blend of creativity, tenacity, and the touch of a magician's hand. Let's hover gently into a whimsical ballroom where the grandeur, once brazen, now demanded the cloak of understated elegance. Imagine a splendid gathering at a mansion with grand French doors that coyly hinted at revelries within. Invited elites slipped through under the veil of darkness, their glistening gowns and tail-coated figures blending into the night, lest their merry revelries offend prudish neighbors counting their canned beans. The great hall, though tastefully muted, housed within its walls an opulent affair. It was as if the universe had taken all of the Great Gatsby's lavish parties and pressed shrink, neatly accommodating them within this modestly audacious showcase of abundant scarcity. The tables were not just set but orchestrated, each an island of plush delight, centered with arrangements of elegant white lilies, those proud blossoms symbolizing sophistication amid economic drought. Guests dined on fine china, not merely because porcelain was appreciated, but each piece held a secret past, dowager gifts typically kept from auctioneers by a hair-width's chance of nostalgia and aroma of financial wisdom. Here, Hiccups were discreet as they polished off hors d'oeuvres that could only be described as Epicurean haikus, tiny, thoughtful compositions made from remnants of what once fed sugar barons and textile tycoons, a whispering ghost of a time when caviar didn't belong in whispered sentences. But the real secret, the pièce de résistance, was placed sotto voce behind a gourmand chef proposition. One could find doughty yet delightful dishes fashioned from imported beans, artfully masqueraded as exotic acorns of opulence. As delightful jazz melodies drifted through the room thanks to a sublime string quartet that moonlighted as a speakeasy band, conversation drifted towards spirited discourse. There were the inevitable tales of ancestry, polished to a prism-like splendor, the last vestige for some of their once unabridged fortunes. The embroidery of past glories seeped sweet tales into the consciousness of the room, as though each syllable bore the heady aroma of vintage Bordeaux in recycled bottles. Perhaps one of the most curious luxuries, both hidden and celebrated, was knowledge. While the markets trembled and economies quivered as if performing a poorly executed Charleston, the intellectual elite traded in ideas that moved like whispers through wrought iron gates into the hallowed halls of this secret knowledge enclave. Bedtime stories were replaced with passages from epic tomes, translated for jest and juiced with humor as spicy as a contraband brandy, to distract from the gruel fetched in metaphorical pockets the next day. The true splendor of these gatherings was not fondly measured in silken drapes or imported delicacies alone, but rather in a commodity of exquisite rarity during the Depression. A touch of unfettered laughter, smuggled like an exotic tobacco blend from tales half-baked and fully savored by the light of crystal chandeliers. Even if only for an evening, worry found itself on holiday, inviting unassuming joy for charades between cricket sounds and candlelit dances. We draw this chapter's silk curtain on a scene gentle but rich with hope rewoven. The merriest irony of affluent days amidst want. A dollop of camaraderie spilled into the awareness of revelers, making even the weight of pockets less heavy than their feather-puffed covers. As they drifted away one by one at the evening's starry denouement, they left with soft hearts and minds tucked in the nostalgia of shared tales. With whispered goodnight to all, excluding none from our whimsical tale, dawn's gentle promise trails beyond these halls, perhaps ripe to paint a less-sown parable in the coming chapter. As the skyscrapers of the Great Depression's metropolitan landscapes stood tall, like weary giants wearing a drab uniform of soot and fog, a contrasting scene unfolded behind the gilded doors and heavy curtains of the elite. While breadlines and dusty streets were the norm on the outside, inside the whisper of jazz formed an invisible barrier, tuning out the harsh realities. In this chapter, let us tiptoe into one of those opulent Manhattan penthouses, where life seemed to defy economic gravity. Picture a grand room, adorned in splendor more, suited to a Renaissance prince than a 20th century investment banker, the flooring gleaming underfoot, thanks to the diligent attention of a small army of domestic staff. There, amidst chandeliers casting light as soft as an afternoon nap, is a spectacle so rich in its absurdity it might just be called a delicacy, the slightly scandalous, often misunderstood practice of bathtub caviar. Picture the scene, a tub larger than most modern-day city apartments, with clawed feet that could pass for the remnants of an ancient dragon. Within this porcelain palace, cool, blue-hued water hosts thousands of the tiny, shimmering pearls of sturgeon eggs, caviar of the most impeccable pedigree. Here lounged a tycoon with a taste for irony as rich as his affinity for the sturgeon. As he submerged himself into this piscine decadence, the caviar mingling gently with the finely milled rose-scented bubbles, he couldn't help but chuckle at the absurdity of it all. But this wasn't merely an opulence. For the sake of opulence. No, the caviar bath wasn't born of madness, but curiosity, a supposedly holistic remedy suggested by one Count Rougemont, a European noble turned New York socialite who claimed that this piscine pâté was the secret to youth eternal. And so, consumed by the fleeting desire to outstrip Father Time, our affluent friend indulged in a treatment more decadent than effective. Meanwhile, in another corner of this chateau of excess, another more lively pursuit took place. Wealthy hobbyists engaging in indoor botany of a different sort. An offshoot of the prohibition, wherein any party worth its giggle would house a hidden cellar or speakeasy. Some sophisticated pleasure seekers dedicated entire rooms to growing medicinal herbs, often intertwined with the rich aroma of tobacco plants and chocolate vines. It was less about sustenance and more about the exotic veneer of self-sufficiency, complete with the added thrill of circumventing certain agricultural laws. Within these lush sanctuaries flourished opulent conversations, winding as the climbing ivy. Here, the wealthy and witty debated the merits of growing your own herbs versus smuggling them from Italy, over a game of chess whose pieces were carved from black walnut and ivory, more valuable now, thanks to both their craftsmanship and the gossip woven into their purchase stories. Of course, such lush pursuits required a gastronomic counterpart. Dining in the Great Depression took a bizarre air of duality, a city of contrast and disparity expressed through dichotomies on a dinner plate. While the masses savored the modest joys of a loaf of bread, those with wallets as large as their waistlines perfected Depression-era decadence, dining on dishes sculpted from the rarest ingredients found this side of the Atlantic. Amidst dinners of duck à l'orange and lobster, Thermidor came copeaux de beurre, specially crafted French butter curls, so revered they came with their own certificate of authenticity. Each curl was a masterpiece, a sliver of dairy decadence handcrafted in a culinary ballet, more intricate than a royal tapestry. And if something as simple as butter could reach such heights, then each meal became a performance art, using the depression itself as the unspoken jest's linchpin. As our exploration of opulence dips beneath the surface, like that of a swan gliding upon a crystal lake, let's hold on to this gently humorous tapestry. Like the slow dance of a pendulum, our journey through the era's hidden luxuries has more folds to unfurl. A quiet breath of antiquity, punctuated by soft laughter. Drift now, as we meander into the next softly glowing alcove of historical reverie, where dreams are laughed gently onto the night. As sunlight shimmered on the dewy lawn of the Vanderbilt estate, young Willie Vanderbilt pondered the existential conundrum before him. To croquet, or not to croquet? A profound dilemma during a time when most folks were ruminating over whether it was a good day to fly a kite over their mud-patch backyards. You see, in certain leafier corners of society, the Great Depression was more of a mild inconvenience, as bothersome as one's corset popping during a tea dance. In 1932, while America collectively tightened its proverbial belt, the very, very top still afforded double-stretch suspenders, if you will. The Vanderbilts, Carnegies and Rockefellers lived a life that seemed plucked out of a Fitzgerald novel, or perhaps more fittingly, a Marx Brothers film. For in these places, humor blended charmingly with the rib-tickling resilience of the era. Let's take a peek into the sumptuous balls held in the halls of opulence, where crystal clinked pleasantly with crystal, and champagne flowed as freely as the Hudson River in April. Oh, the lavish galas with a touch of the absurd. Imagine a great deer hunt, where, thanks to the economic climate, the deer were costumed footmen and the hunting party used porcelain gun knickknacks. Yes, it was sport with a dash of theatrical farce, necessary to ease the hearts of their reality-marinated minds. Our tour of upper-echelon eccentricities wouldn't be complete without glimpsing Mrs. de Groot Smythe's grand obsession, her secret collection of signature cheeses. Her granddaughter-in-law often whispered that they were possessed of their own tastes and personalities, and perhaps a tiny hint of a grudge. Cloistered behind a sliding velvet curtain, these cheeses were preserved like royal artifacts against the unjust encroachments of any cheddar predators. While the masses gathered around radios for an escape into Buddy Bolden's jazz, or Roosevelt's fireside chats, within the mirrored confines of gilded drawing rooms, these gentlefolk enjoyed their own sonorous diversions. Take, for instance, the peculiar ritual among the Rockefellers called table rapping, which involved not the haunting of spirits, but a merry symphony performed by percussionists tapping rhythms with silver forks against multi-hued glassware. a fine-tuned concerto that would surely make any glass harmonica shatter with envy. Meanwhile, the fashion scene strut in another dimension. Amidst the common populace, dresses might be patched from potato sacks, making them place seekers into the great pantheon of sartorial repurposing. However, in a salon downtown, spools of imported silk drape the shoulders of society's elite like satin whispers. Have you ever considered wearing a dress so extravagant it required its own carriage to follow? Well, neither had most of America. Desiree Fontaine, a society maven of Peacock Alley fame, introduced the concept of sleeping parlors by night, a performance art venue where pajamas were couture and fainting couches became stages for elaborately choreographed dreaming. Convinced that dreams foretold fortunes, members would gather to explore each other's nocturnal escapades, a scene as hilarious to outsiders as it was earnest to participants. As our curtains draw to a soft close on this slumberous scene, we glide past gilded gates, returning from their exotic orbits to touch again the familiar cradle of humankind's quiet, murmuring dreams. Our next journey will take us deeper into the silent currents of history, promising whimsies and revelations as warm as an old sweater stitched with time's golden yarn. But for now, it's time to drift softly amongst the melodies of your own dreaming symphony. Amidst the stark landscapes of the Great Depression, a time when thrifty survival was the name of the game, there existed a world of secret opulence. Unlike the monochrome scenes captured in photographs of the era, the wealthy's lives resembled a kaleidoscope of unimaginable wealth carefully concealed behind unassuming facades. Our story tonight quietly tiptoes into this world where elegance sneaked in through doors marked ordinary. Imagine an opulent garden party, held not in one's typical estate, but on a cleverly disguised rooftop oasis in the bustling heart of New York City. Accessed via a back door blended into the wallpaper of an otherwise quaint foyer, this retreat ensured privacy. And really, who would suspect that behind a facade that whispered of moderate comfort lay a skyward garden, lush and aloof, where violins hummed softer than a cat's purr? These celestial gatherings of the elite were not marked by the sight of frosty flutes of champagne. No, that would be too obvious. Instead, the glassware, borrowed from Prohibition's speakeasy past, lent a clandestine thrill to beverages contained within. It wasn't so much the grape that defined the wine here, but the ambience and, perhaps, a secret splash of French allure for good measure. Our wealthy hosts, ever wary of being extravagant with something as brash as couture, but unwilling to yield on style, held on to their sartorial masterpieces. They innovated in stealth. As economic hardships crushed, textile mills. Their outfits were crafted from recycled specters of past seasons. A shimmering train was expertly tailored into a cape, a Parisian gown spun into a striking dinner jacket. To the uninitiated, these were simply charming remnants of better times, with no hint of great cost or careful concealment. Enter the world of culinary stealth, where chefs masquerading as humble cooks worked their magic. Although a plain stew simmered on the stove for all to see, beneath that facade lay culinary alchemy. Secret dishes whispered forth from hidden kitchens, delivering tastes that teleported lucky diners back to carefree days of prosperity. Perhaps it was roast quail masquerading as mere roast beef, or oysters playing supporting roles to more humble fish. And as for conspiratorial communications, why, the age-old art of letter writing provided its cloak. Letters passed through unassuming postal services, their true correspondence hidden in the cunning selection of stationery or to nuances between lines like clever literary ciphers. These feather-light nods assured the favored few of a forthcoming gathering, concealed within the mundane folds of silver-edged stationery. Though this Baroque world moved in hushed tones and behind heavy drapes, their escapades sometimes flirted with the whimsical. For instance, the exclusive club meetings, where homemade parlor games surpassed any luxury. Cruise lines' frivolity seemed hardly extravagant at first glance. Yet these evenings became grand theatres of intrigue and laughter, hosted under the cover of darkness when orchestras of owls provided the soundtrack. The pièce de résistance of this stealthy indulgence was the silent cinema screenings where, shrouded in plush robes of secrecy, the wealthy enjoyed films as a most luxurious escape. Using projectors hidden in what appeared to be mere steamer trunks, grand artworks flickered onto bedsheet screens. It was the great opera of light and shadows playing for private audiences against the backdrop of greyed skylines. As the night sways gently to and fro, from the top of the rooftops to dusky cellars, its warmth whispered by candle-lit walls, the sense of loyal camaraderie among this glamorous elite becomes the secret thread of their story. It sews them together, section upon section, through the challenging yet profoundly human fabric of that tucked-away world. Its very existence lent a soft gleam to the harshness of the Great Depression, a reminder that creativity and camaraderie are the true gold whose luster never fades. In this veiled era, the elite danced to their own melody, crafting havens of hushed luxury amidst the humdrum clang of hardship, a testament to the indomitable spirit. Their narratives, like dreams wrapped in silk and tucked with the imperceptible touch of humor, bring us gently on the brink of yet another chapter. As we delve into the whims of the wealthy during the Great Depression, it's important to remember that while many found themselves clutching their wallets with the same stubbornness as a toddler refusing bedtime, some of society's upper crust were pursuing peculiar peacetime pastimes. Imagine, if you will, the rich of the 1930s casting off their mourning robes to engage in the day's extravagant endeavors. For some of the elite, this meant splurging on pet pampering with a devotion that would put any modern-day influencer to shame. Deciphering whether they were keeping exotic wildlife or securing an imaginative insurance policy, they adopted monkeys, lions, and all manner of creatures you might otherwise expect to encounter in darkened adventure novels. These lavish menageries became status symbols, quite the step beyond the standard lapdog who might only demand kibble and occasionally mark territory on an unwelcome newspaper article. Amongst the cosseting of creatures, luxurious lounging wasn't complete without tailored clothing. So extravagant one could almost hear them whispering sweet nothings to their owners at night. "Don't worry, you're the belle of the breakfast nook." Yes, bespoke, handmade suits were still en vogue, crafted by craftsmen preserving age-old secrets. These suits might have been so smooth they could flap from one end of a room to the other like a dandy satellite, but let it be known, they just screamed success, albeit in a hushed, silk-lined tone. Meanwhile, spa treatments for the well-to-do reached heights as bizarre as a low-flying aeroplane. Mud baths were all the rage, though perhaps gently marinating oneself like a Victorian cucumber salad is a more apt description. One bath was so swanky, it claimed to be the very dirt Cleopatra herself had once dabbled in. Historical accuracy aside, with a garnish of sincerity, it would be no surprise if they hoped to soak up some of that ancient charm, a belief in the magical transference of charisma through mud. Oddly specific European vacations were also a hit, featuring itineraries that seemed designed by an exuberant dinner party guest who had perhaps taken one too many sips of their preferred spirit of choice. One destination to find dear Mrs. Donna and friends might have been the Swiss Alps, not just famous for their splendid views, but for gourmet feasts composed almost entirely of cheese. Imagine dining on melted magic while balancing precariously on a snowy slope, history in one hand and a wine-laden fondue fork in the other. The pièce de résistance, of course, was the existence of private theatres. Converted from grand dining rooms, the elite invited friends to watch avant-garde plays penned by playwrights who are likely the brothers-in-law of someone important. These private performances were filled with both drama and a delightful pinch of awkwardness. For how does one interject with a standing ovation when the playwright is busy fiddling with the mise-en-scène behind their own gaudy curtain? Our brief sojourn through these luxurious pastimes must pause here, like a butler waiting for his cue, setting the stage for even more curious insights. As we drift into the events that define these peculiar times, Allow your imagination to unfurl like the silk of a bespoke tie, for there lies more history behind the velvet curtains. As the clock struck bedtime hours in 1933, the world seemed washed in shades of sepia and austerity. Yet behind the mahogany-paneled doors of America's elite, a different narrative played out, one that danced tantalizingly close to opulence without shattering the illusion of shared hardship. Herein lay the secret luxuries of the Great Depression's privileged, whose extravagance appeared more marvelous against the monochrome backdrop of publicly preached thrift. Beneath the arches of grand residences, dinner parties resumed their clandestine sparkle. While the working class might serve a meager stew, the glitterati gathered eagerly around tables laden with tropical fruits that arrived on the shortened routes of a smuggler's ship. Let's be clear, the humble banana was elevated to near mythical status, along with its more exotic companions, mangoes and pineapples, gracing those secretive soirees. Our protagonists, let's call them the Connollys, continued to indulge in this surreptitious splendor. The Connolly estate was renowned for evening events, where their grand piano played without cease, often by a dashing young man who could have been a professional concert pianist, had he only needed a job. The extravagance was not in the music per se, but rather the fresh carnations that adorned the room, refreshed to perfection by their in-house gardener. Blooming extravagance, when even a single stem was considered a luxury outside the manor's hefty walls. Hairdos retained their height and glamour thanks to private stylists, a strangely clandestine practice that took place in the home's attic, far from the inquisitive gaze of those who might question the pampering. Ladies emerged, resplendent, with ringlets so shiny they might have anticipated the brighter days to come. They claimed good genes as the source of their coiffure's tenacity against time. But we, prone to the pursuit of a good tale, know better. But the technology, the crowning jewel of modernity. While most citizens relied on their neighbors to gather around a single crackling radio, the Connollys had radios in every room. Each device whispered symphonies and thrilling sagas as the household moved from one grandly adorned chamber to the next. Only those who had truly mastered the art of nonchalance could avert suspicion when questioned about their enviable knowledge of Orson Welles' updates. In the Connolly parlor, laughter and the clinking of glasses were frequent guests. The alcohol prohibition, still tepidly enforced, seemed a distant memory in their world. A secret door in the library opened to a wine cellar so grand, a sommelier would have fainted from sheer bliss. Bottles were uncorked with unsteady hands under the guise of camaraderie, and toasts were made under the stars that blinked approvingly through oversized bay windows. All the merrymaking was, to say the least, bordering on the Gatsby-esque, although notably without crashing cars or pools that became newsworthy for the wrong reasons. The Connollys and their ilk truly embraced the lost art of discretion, discreet enough that they never created ripples beyond their velvet curtains, but just reckless enough to keep the attendees returning for more, week after opulent week. As the evening drew to a close and the story of another grand night wrapped up like a cozy silk robe around the shoulders, it was not uncommon for guests to slowly drift, pondering when next they might gather amidst such splendor. The weightier burdens of the day felt as distant as a fog that had been pushed back by the empowering rays of a firmament filled with whispers. The night carried on faint echoes of laughter and stories, a still untold. Curled upon their plush pillows, guests reflected on another moment spent in history's lap of luxury, a hum of silent promises, accentuating the need to cloak themselves in sepia tones again, just for a time, until the sun rose once more. And as gentle night winds swirled their dreams, there lingered the certainty of stories just waiting to unfold, a reminder that, gentle reader, lies yet more merriment and cunning to share beyond the visible horizon of dawn. In a dimly lit room filled with the soft glow of a single stained glass lamp, we find ourselves flipping through the pages of history, where we stumble upon tales of indulgence hidden beneath the drab cloak of the Great Depression. As the ordinary folk tightened their belts and patched their trousers, certain members of the upper crust remained rather comfortably cushioned by their fortunes. This is where our footsteps lead us tonight, into the ornate halls of excess, where the rich quietly shuffled their secret, luxuries behind closed doors. Take, for instance, the peculiar case of Mrs. Hortense Worthington III, of the New York Worthingtons, of course, who, despite the crashing stock market, refused to go without her beloved caviar. An attendee at her famed soirees during this tumultuous era might have glimpsed her small rebellion against the frugality of the times. Perhaps a silver platter of the finest beluga nestled discreetly amongst more demure offerings like homemade bread rolls and ginger snaps. Ah, yes, Hortense had a knack for subtlety, as subtle as a rhinestone in a haystack. In the echoing halls of estates across the country, beyond the prying eyes of commoners, the rich had constructed their own little havens. Whispers of grand libraries filled with first editions and fragrant cigars wafting through air thick with privilege were known only to those who cracked the invite-only code. There, in the plush confines of leather armchairs, the titans of industry and heirs to fortunes continued their convivial debates over single malts, as if Wall Street's wailing had never reached their countryside manners. Meanwhile, in the heart of Manhattan, the Waldorf Astoria Hotel concealed a secret of its own behind its opulent facades. Within its luxurious walls thrived the bolt holes of those who'd adeptly sidestepped financial misfortune, or rather, those whose fortunes publicly slipped while privately remaining firmly grasped. On any given day, wandering the halls of the illustrious hotel, one might chance upon none other than Sir Reginald Pompington IV. Well, not a Sir, nor a fourth, but it completed the image he so delightfully curated. He was someone who, despite his flamboyant moniker and lavish clothes, was nothing if not adaptable to the times. Reginald took to disguising his coveted lobster dinners beneath the misleading guise of catch of the day fish stew, a recipe noted for being served in small portions with an additional helping of subterfuge. Outside, the glitzy estates and posh hotels stretched a broader realm of artful indulgence as well. The world of cinema, afloat with fantasies that provided a means of escape for both the beleaguered and the blissfully ignorant, saw its fair share of pampered egos. The silver screen captivators, the swashbuckling heroes and sultry dames, didn't just play the part of opulence. Many lived it. Behind the curtain of carefully spun yarn and public sympathy for the modest actor, there lay gateways to private screenings of the latest films. Films that appeared only in cinemas visible to the blessedly weary eye, for their vaults held exclusive treasures offered to the very chosen. It was these cinematic special showings that caused quite the hubbub one afternoon, when a reel of Clark Gable staring disinterestedly into the camera, presumably during a camera test, was accidentally shown to the city's who's who instead of the glossy epic they had come for. One eyewitness reported the scene as a profound moment of humanizing reality. Though, according to others, it was a glorious instance of charming inefficiency. The incident was quickly glossed over with a hearty chuckle, and yet another clink of crystal glasses. As the chapter of secret luxuries between decadent ballrooms, hidden lobster suppers, and exclusive cinema nights draws to a close, our delightful wanderings take pause on the verge of another tale. The nocturnal air feels cooler, hinting at the slowing pace of a world still turning amid all its extravagant corners. But don't you fret, for in the stretch of our dreamy journey, there are still more yarns to be spun, drawing us further into the night like a moth to the flame of curiosity. Picture the bustling city of New York in the 1930s. To the casual observer, it might have seemed like luxury had packed its bags and taken a permanent vacation. Breadlines and dust were plentiful. Well, imagine them as a high-carb landscaping choice. Yet behind a select few, securely latched doors, a different kind of magic transpired. A kind where creaking Periton Art Deco cabinets held more secrets than Miss Marple ever let on. For those who could afford to watch the world's worries from their penthouse windows, luxury was not merely about excess. It was an artful dance of discretion and indulgent escapism. Take, for instance, the art of fine dining. While most people were queuing up for a warm bowl of soup, a curious niche of well-heeled socialites practiced their own gastronomic rituals, gourmet chefs, finding themselves inconspicuously tucked away behind secret kitchen doors, orchestrated culinary spectacles. One could only imagine these clandestine feasts with foie gras whispering sweet nothings and caviar providing an obligatory opulent garnish atop many a distressed palate. Moving beyond the edibles, let us waltz into the realm of personal grooming, a curious phenomenon where the wealthy pursued solace amidst scented bubbles. Perfume, darling, was like invisible silk for the soul. While the majority scrubbed dishes with the same vigor, they washed their hair. Or let's be a tad optimistic, the same at least weekly vigor. The privileged were frolicking in their own veritable spa retreats at home. Imagine clawfoot tubs filled with water, perpetually on the brink of warmth, awash with lilac oils. Therein lay bubbles reaching audacious heights and, if the household was particularly sassy, the faint tunes of a gramophone played soothing jazz, while ladies and gentlemen alike embraced the species' bewildering dependence on leisure. Should you, amidst this narrative, begin to mentally throttle our affluent ancestors, you might find some solace in the fact that comfort met function in the strangest of ways. In those days, much like the Dow Jones Index, fashion was an art of uppies and downs. However, those ups were decidedly opulent. In private galleries, under the dim tracklights, relics of sartorial decadence waited, their turn in hushed admiration. Furs so luxurious, even the haughtiest of cats would look upon them with envy. Fabrics spun with threads finer than a grandmother's tale. Stepping beyond the wardrobe, one might ponder what other opiates for the restless kept the cogs of grandeur spinning. Well, the theatre might have been going through minimalistic phases, but not the salons of the wealthy. This was the epoch of private screenings, secret film soirees that rivaled the Oscars, minus the red carpet. Simply because invisible silk was the whole new narrative, remember. With glistening projectors, they would whisk guests away to fantastical realms, complete with chuckles and champagne. Now, as this slumberous symphony of comforts hums softly to its close, one cannot help but tip a hat to the radiant resilience of hope, sparking in the hearts of the less fortunate. For those fortunate ones basking in the opulence of their shimmering retreat, each bauble and feathered whisper served as an homage to perseverance, and perhaps a tribute to an era determined not to lose itself entirely in distress. As you nestle deeper into the birth of your own bed with these tales of surreptitious splendor and bygone extravagance, allow the fatigue of today to drift softly into a reverie of historic curiosity. Soon, we'll continue to mosey down the gilded corridors of time, where dreams clink like china cups upon silver trays, waiting to unfold their velvet-lined archives. Sweet slumbers await. There is more to uncover, after all. Picture the world of the 1930s, a time when jazz was the symphony of syncopation, an unruly soundtrack to a period of economic woe and hardship. Yet, beneath the surface of what seemed like endless breadlines and tireless attempts to recreate a perfectly symmetrical pyramid of canned beans, there lay the clandestine opulence of the few who thrived. Oh yes, there were those who sheltered themselves with comforts beyond the realm of everyday soup, kitchens and flapper-driven dance marathons. Amidst the somber newsprint of desperation, a unique microcosm existed in penthouses, country estates, and curiously enough, on lavish yachts that floated as islands of indulgence in a sea of foreclosures. These titans of industry and stubbornly wealthy individuals refused to let a mere economic crash tarnish their gilded lifestyles. One such figure was Mildred, Duchess of whatever sounded uppity in those days. She navigated the period with a grace akin to a ballerina en pointe, albeit one who fancied herself in silken slippers rather than the earthy embrace of sensible shoes. Her secret luxury: a lavish collection of hats more elaborate than any royal wedding cake, towers of feathers and ribbon that could turn a simple walk into a fabric festival, drawing gazes and occasionally errant pigeons. Yet, the Great Depression was not merely a stage for high society's audacious sense of fashion. It was also a competitive playground where Creativity mingled with indulgence, often with hilarious results. Take, for instance, the rise of the depression dinner parties. Elite hosts, refusing to let their social calendars wilt, conducted soirees that were in equal parts luxurious and, how shall we put it gently, economically sensitive. Guests would arrive in satin and bow ties, only to find courses served on concave mirrors, starring a single leaf of lettuce, dressed as though attending a grand masquerade itself. Such evenings were less about quenching hunger and more about the shimmer of status and creativity on display. One particularly inspired host once conjured a soup course consisting merely of hot water artfully poured over empty bowls, suggesting a broth so delicate it had all but eloped with the spoon. This era also birthed the concept of investment pets, because why not invest in the next big animal when the stock market seemed to have developed a preference for unexpected nap times? Exotic animal. Trends surged among the affluent, who hoped that their choice of an eccentric pet would serve as a feather in their cap, or perhaps an entire peacock. Stories abound of wallabies benignly bounding about private gardens, or of aristocratic tortoises wearing monogrammed shells, the slow and steady embodiment of wealth itself. Not to be outdone, automobiles became canvases for wealth exhibition. While the common folk puffed and chugged in drab machinery, the wealthy turned cars into statements of art and arrogance. Coach builders constructed vehicles that ignored both rationality and, often, the rules of parking garages. These automobiles boasted lavish interiors, replete with wood inlay, crystal perfume holders, and cocktail cabinets, though the idea of absorbing a tipple while maneuvering turns was a bit of a roll of the dice. Yet in the symphony of excess, perhaps the sweetest notes belonged to the secret concerts held in drawing rooms across the country. Here, where talented, musicians played with the kind of passion that could turn the most stoic of hearts into puddles of rhythm and blues. Attendees waltzed on carpets likely woven from the dreams of dragons, or at least priced similarly. As the night dances along to the hints of jazz and indulgent laughter echoing through the corridors of long-forgotten realms, we can only dream of what whisper-rich effusions await us next. With each tip of the hat and swirl of the dress, the curtain falls on another act of sumptuous secrecy, gently leading us into the embrace of the swirling shadows where our journey will continue. In the deep, velvety shadows of the Great Depression, where pennies pinched their pockets and the jangling of coins became a symphony of hope, a hidden world lived in exquisite contrast. This was an era where silk pajamas were not merely a wishful thought, but a sleeping necessity for some. Imagine, if you will, the very wealthiest among them throwing silk pajama parties. It was a whole affair, sparked by the opulent comfort of sliding between sheets of Egyptian cotton as you chuckle at the woes of a world outside your neatly manicured lawn. In the glittering atriums of upscale apartments, where light refracted through chandeliers that looked like fallen stars encased in glistening crystals, the wealthy still found ways to sparkle. A little sock-scented soiree, perhaps, with silken slippers and champagne that bubbled like dreams waiting to effervesce. For these fortunate few, the answer to the world's woes lay hidden behind thick, velvety drapes, far from the scent of dust hovering in the soup lines. These glorious gatherings were not mere whims. They required the artful alchemy of distraction, like hiring a well-spoken scholar whose only role was to debate whether the fortunes of Cleopatra would have been better retained had she known how to invest in stocks other than those in her wardrobe. What good is a gilded Roman lover, after all, if he cannot recommend a diversified portfolio? But you might wonder what sumptuous delicacies graced the tables of such events, where Epicurean excess had learned to pirouette around prohibition. Rest assured, these culinary indulgences included oysters that were sautéed in seas of velvety sauce, along with truffles that had traipsed thousands of miles to find their way onto a porcelain plate far grander than any humble carrot or cabbage. Picture soups simmered for hours, not out of necessity, but for the simple joy of infusing broth with the very spirit of delight. Despite the bleak outlook, fashion remained a battlefield of creativity. Feathers from exotic lands adorned headpieces, turning any walk down a hallway into a strut worth of a catwalk. Even the dogs of these households strutted in tweed jackets, tailored with such finesse that even their tails wagged in the very frequency of luxury. Not to be overlooked were the comfort contraptions of coaxing slumber, those punting pillows and neck-cradling contraptions, if only for the luxury of dreaming away a dismal day. Bedrooms turned into sanctuaries of solace, with feather fills that felt like slumbering upon a cloud softly plucked from the heavens. It was during this time of languid luxuries that grand kitchens became stages for the greedy gourmet, a sensational culinary magician known both for his flamboyant chef's hats and his ability to make a risotto that opened new dimensions of taste. He became the secret weapon of desirous gatherings, his ladle a wand, spinning spells of walnut tarts and poultry pies with names too French to be taken seriously. As the night deepened and chandeliers flickered like hopeful stars in a gloomy sky, the elite huddled closer, whispering tales of extravagant follies and fortunes, as though these stories themselves could ignite warmth against the chilling air outside. Eventually, even the murmurs faded, blending seamlessly into the deceptive quietude of privilege. And so, as you drift into sleep, think of those tiny silver spoons that tinkled against porcelain demitasses, a lullaby of opulence that played on, softly fading into a gentle hum. As dreams cast their net around your senses, imagine the soft rustle of silk pajamas swaying like gentle waves, cradling you in a cocoon of historic comfort, the secrets of luxury gently whispering as they rock you to sleep. Thus wrapped in their secret tales, our train of thought gracefully moves forward, the tracks humming a serene reminder of yet more tales to uncover, like pages gently turned by midnight breezes. As the Great Depression cast its long, dour shadow over the world, a peculiar paradox emerged among the ranks of those whose pockets were still seemingly lined with gold thread. One might imagine that all frivolities would have been banished from sight, and yet, there they were, tiny oases of opulence in a desert of economic despair. Take, for example, the mysterious case of the extravagant hats. Not the kind you or I might wear on a blustery day at the park, mind you. No, these were full-blown feathered spectacles, a veritable circus for the scalp, boasting plumage so exotic that even the peacocks would have nodded in approval. It seemed that no matter how dreary the times, the wealthy simply couldn't resist the allure of a sumptuous hat atop their heads. Perhaps it was a form of escapism. After all, when one couldn't afford to have a pedigree horse, sometimes it sufficed to look like one. And just as the hat adorned the head, so did the evening glove add mystique to an arm. Amidst soup lines and empty pockets, dinner parties were still being held in hushed corners, lit by candelabras that whispered tales of softer times. Here, the enchantment of an elbow-length glove was not understated. Made of silk or satin, these gloves weren't merely fabric. They were a statement, every fine stitch weaving snugly around the notion of luxury. During a time when many survived on vapors, these garments offered a tactile escape into different realities where elegance reigned supreme. But even these fancies paled when compared to the peculiar obsession with exotic pets. Stories abound of families sharing crusts of bread with their canine companions, loyal creatures who asked for nothing more than the crumbs of companionship. The avant-garde notions among some, however, were a feathered breed apart. Macaws rebuked curtains with their vibrant chatter, carrying an obnoxious charm only exotic creatures can muster. Owning one was like proclaiming, "We may all crumble, but behold, we will have company from the jungles as we do." Then there was the curious business of the enchanted cellar, wine cellars specifically. Odd it was that despite a country caught in the gravity of its own impoverishment, cellars across the land boasted racks groaning under the weight of vintage bottles. Were they opened frequently? Oh no, that would be too obvious. Instead, they served as conversational catalysts at the occasional soiree, each label a relic from the past with a story richer than the liquid it cradled. When actual currency was scarce, boundless charm and the promise of a glass of Merlot became the currency of choice. We cannot overlook, however, the grand tradition of private film viewings. While the masses sought distraction through the bleached light of public screens, the elite would gather in secluded safety to sip on their choice of heady drink, nibble delicately on confectionaries, and bask in the cinematic glow of reels meant for but a few chosen eyes. These private showings were less about the films themselves and more about safeguarding a sliver of normalcy in the dissonance of a chaotic world. Yet, perhaps the greatest secret luxury of all was something far more intangible: the luxury of time itself. While many toiled from dawn until dusk, the privileged had the audacity to ponder, to muse, to dream. In those quiet hours when the world felt like it had stopped, these wealthy few cultivated ideas and innovations that would later paint the future in colors unforeseen. In a way, the real story was not in the hats or the gloves, nor the exotic pets or the clandestine cellars. It was in the ability to remind themselves, however whimsically, that even then, in moments of absurdity, draped in satin and feathers, there was life, there was hope, and above all, humor. As the swirling dance of history sweeps us along, we can nod softly to the luxury of laughter, a gentle nudge towards tomorrow, and perhaps a dream about what revelations the next whispered chapter might unfold as the stars begin their twinkle and the world slides softly into slumber. As the sun sets softly over the smoky haze of steel mills and empty bank offices, drifting down like a velvet curtain, signaling intermission on the Great Depression stage, a curious scene was unfolding in an upscale New York penthouse. The vast mahogany-paneled room, reeking faintly of old money and faintly older cigars, was filled with well-heeled patrons who staunchly refused to acknowledge the absence of food on their gilt-edged plates. Instead, they heartily ingested that elusive soup of mirth and wealth. Amid these convivial gatherings, amidst the grandiloquent gossip and the clinking of empty crystal glasses, because who doesn't enjoy the possibility of a drink, sat Cornelius, gold cufflinks, Vanderwager, a name that might not ring a sonorous bell today, but was whispered in society with capital S, the kind of society that wore tailored suits stitched with silken whispers of prosperity. Old Cornelius, with his calculated pomposity and a moustache rumored to have its own zip code, had perfected the art of recession-proof living. You see, Cornelius had long solved the mystery of keeping wealth invisible and, more importantly, safe. This trick lay not in tangible treasures, like gold bars hidden in faux fireplaces or in porcelain pigs, bloated with coins, but in something far more cunning: invisible luxuries, or as Cornelius preferred, hoity-toity under the radar, the anthropomorphized emblem of economic rebound. He could regularly be heard expounding on the virtues of emotional riches, a most fashionable concept for a man whose bank balances sleepily napped in Swiss accounts, blissfully unaware of the Wall Street dramas. While many suffered and waged an unending battle with hunger and hardships, Cornelius's affluent friends indulged in a different kind of luxury: escapism. They couldn't fill their bellies, so they satisfied themselves with the nourishment of stories and serenades, where each note and every word was carefully chosen to whisk them away from the constraints of current realities to a land where pantry shelves were perennially flourishing and debts were mythical tales told by financial bogeymen. In Cornelius's circle of confidants, among whom the wistful Tilly Pratwhistle and the ever-arguing Winifred and Wilbur Wellbeloved often coalesced, the height of indulgence was none other than a gentleman named Edgar P. Quibley. Edgar, a polymath whose knowledge spanned from the bottom of the sea to the tops of hypothetical beanstalks, was the very personification of verbose opulence. His stories, a melange of historical mirth and drollery, acted as the perfect bread to their imaginative supper. One particular evening, as Edgar waxed poetic about the nonsensical antics of Richard Brinsley Sheridan and the time he almost, accidentally, re-choreographed boxing as a form of formal dance, young Tilly, caught in the smooth webs of his narrative, inadvertently dipped her bread cube into an imaginary fondue pot. This little incident sparked a rolling tide of laughter that brightened even the dimmest corner of Cornelius's room, a laughter worth far more than any luxury the recession might have filched. And so, as these gatherings unfolded, week after week, The invisible thread of joy spun through storytelling proved that the luxurious quality of imagination far outweighed physical opulence. Here, within these unconventionally luxurious walls, dreams provided the warmth, serving as both a reminder and an escape. A reminder that not all wealth was lost, and an escape into a world brimming with humor and history. Even as the strains of jazz from Cornelius's gramophone floated into the ether, merging harmoniously with the long-forgotten notes of the world's prelapsarian orchestra, a serene, hushed agreement unfurled like a flag among his guests, that in this world of carefully curated anecdotes, luxury was letting go, allowing stories, laughter, and the occasional splurge of hidden whiskey to guide them through the darkest of times. Now, as we gently draw the blinds on this chapter, let your mind drift to where stories weave their magic, guiding you into dreams lined with velvet trattorias and whimsical courtyards, until the dawn softly beckons anew, as the wheels of the Great Depression's economy seem to grind to a halt, with their creaky clattering echoing through the ghost towns of America's once bustling cities. A few quietly oiled their own invisible gears and kept their lifestyles immaculately polished. Our story on this particular evening takes us into the dimly lit opulence of an exclusive dinner party, where softly clinking glasses sound like wind chimes in a secret garden of riches. The air, scented subtly with bravado and champignon sauté truffles, was filled with whispers of stock tips uttered in the same hushed reverence as church confessions. In contrast to the bread lines snaking through the streets like desperate tendrils, an inner circle of the well-to-do gathered in cozy drawing rooms upholstered in velvets and wits. Imagine scenes where gentlemen with monocles, those sophisticated face coasters of yore, competed silently on who could sip soup more genteelly without dislodging their finely waxed mustaches. Meanwhile, the ladies, dressed in dresses sewn from enough silk to single-handedly save the worming industry, listened intently, nodding to demonstrate sophistication rather than understanding. But what were these clandestine celebrations of opulence, masked by the tumultuous backdrop of economic hardship, if not wonderfully absurd? Inside a mansion's gilded walls, odd luxuries persisted. For instance, if one happened to peruse the bookshelves lining these hallowed halls, one might stumble upon libraries that, instead of dusty tomes, housed rows upon rows of canned goods. These weren't just ordinary tins, mind you. Each can's label was a delight of culinary art, depicting exotic fruits never to cross the lips. They were the intellectual investments of their day, isocaloric stockpiles for the imaginative gourmand. Docking metaphor with absurdity, it wasn't uncommon for these magnates of means to purchase rubber yachts. Yes, you heard that right. Inflatable, opulent conveyances for cruising the garden pools which they had filled, ironically, with Evian water imported directly from France. It was said that one distinguished gentleman once attempted to charter his rubber yacht across the English Channel, only to be foiled by his own inability to procure a suitable inflatable crew. Indeed, tales of such luxuries merely scratched the surface. In fact, the practice of wearing different fridges became rather chic. Picture, if you will, grand ice boxes stacked with chilled sable coats. Coats which had never seen a snowflake, cradled upon racks like fragile glass sculptures, wore the frost as if it were a new Parisian vogue. Their owners, delighted by the preservation tactic, could be seen sporting the freshest of furs at social gatherings, with pelts chilled to perfection without ever leaving the room. For those with unquenching appetites, not just for sustenance but to satisfy their modern sensibilities, feeding machines became the fanciful contraptions they could not do without. These devices, with all the charm of Rube Goldberg's most elaborate flights of fancy, mechanized meals with delightful precision, while the masses lamented mere morsels of bread. Extravagant levers and pulleys ensured these diners were pampered by setting out 5-course meals directly into their laps, quite literally, a served merit. And as the conversation at this peculiar party presided on, one couldn't overlook the cultural nuances, the eccentricities. Consider the attire of those exclusive guests, Truly, a jigsaw puzzle of fabric choices. It seemed that fashion, in its own dainty rebellion, had taken on a curious path where tuxedos were sewn from fabric, printed to resemble noble granite. Dresses flowed like cascades of nectar, or at least colored to match. And the shoes. Oh, they were carved from the whimsical sense of humor, each pump and loafer designed to squeak melodiously when they pranced. As you dreamily drift deeper into the ensemble of these whispered tales, another door beckons, softly creaking open to yet another salon of history's forgotten scripts. Beyond, another facet of luxurious absurdity awaits to lull you further into this tapestry of time and humor, until, like whispers upon a gentle night breeze, this whimsical history invites you along, just a little further, down its dimly lit corridor. As the world spun into the quagmire of the Great Depression, a curious phenomenon unfolded behind closed doors and tightly drawn drapes. While the majority subsisted on thin soups and the economical warmth of a rag-clad hearth, the elite was silently nurturing its own traditions of secret elegance. Chapter 21 winks at us like a conspiratorial butler, urging us to tiptoe into the shadowy realms of posh indulgences. So, shush now, and let's follow the trail of curling cigar smoke and the sound of champagne corks popping in clandestine unison. Beneath the glossy veneer of desperation, gentlemen had not entirely hung up their acred tailcoats. In hidden soirees, the cut and thrust of sharp-witted conversation were accompanied by petit fours and fine brandy. It wasn't unusual for tycoons and socialites to envelop themselves in lavish parties, consequently causing cardigans and thrift shop attitudes to swoon from neglect. Beneath the lavish sands of California, where the sun bathed the earth in eternal light, a secret luxury emerged in the form of private screening rooms. These miniature palaces housed plush velvet chairs and state-of-the-art projectors, which were essentially boxes resembling giant contraptions capable of swallowing a mime, or perhaps two. Here, the elite weren't just watching the same movies as the common folks. Oh no, they were the savored premieres notoriously previewed before a select few marble-sided whispers reached the eager, ticker-stub clutching hands of the public. A dreamland unto itself, albeit within the confines of exorbitantly thick curtains. We slide our focus from opulent vices to the drawn veils of New York's high society, gliding into magnificent penthouses with kitchens that seem to operate on an open secret policy, supplying exotic goods that emerged under suitably trivial pseudonyms. Grape juice. Anyone. Here, fortunes once owed to distant coastlines found their place through connections older than the vines they were whispered from. This wasn't just the realm of the ostensibly playful and thrill-seeking. No, it involved networks of generational craft. Savvy, rich matrons, attuned to whispers like psychic receivers, were known to purchase yet-to-be-invented kitchen gadgets, the Gatsbys of gadgetry. These devices created miracles unseen by the common peeler and pot, but perhaps involved a whispered promise of launching the ever-elusive quasi-culinary revolution expected any year now. Art, too, played a secret tune in this orchestra of luxury, while families conserved precious coins by congregating around the ether-rich warmth of radio. Stories. There were those who hosted impromptu soirees in grand halls adorned with new masterpieces. These works were cued, paused only to allow luscious compliments to dance, interspersed with socially lubricated historians, explaining the bold brushstrokes and avant-garde use of colors that regular sensible folk had no inkling even existed. Invisible to most, or perhaps conveniently blurred, such exposés underscored a world of indulgence that chuckled discreetly at the notion of scrimping and saving. Just then, London makes its appearance to remind us, hey, what about the rest of us? True, ubiquitous tea took on new life for the elite during this time. Luxurious rooms buzzed about underground, not simply metaphorically, as tunnels, though not always literal, echoed with laughter. Genuine tea from the Far East, a leaf worthy of fairies, leaped from cup to tongue in mischievous camaraderie amidst a backdrop of jazz that resisted any and all depression with syncopation alone. And as these stories weave through our drowsy mind into threadbare dreams, we're left with a portrait painted in the subtler shades of extravagance. The Great Depression wore many masks, and luxury, it seems, wore the most intriguing one. A tantalizing waltz in a world that held its breath, yet moved with timeless grace. As midnight hues embrace, we find our minds ambling towards simpler capers, perhaps to meet a place where reality tips its hat toward whimsy. And what tales follow next, dear dreamer, are soft secrets waiting in the wings to cradle you into sleep's embrace as we turn another page of the unexpected, as the whispers of the roaring 20s faded into the humdrum of the Great Depression, a curious phenomenon unfolded among the upper echelons of society. While breadlines snaked down city blocks and dust clouds turned vibrant farms into barren plains, the wealthier segment managed to maintain their own peculiar brand of, shall we say, richly reserved vices. Picture this. While the common folk sought solace in folk tunes sung over a crackling radio, a select few were indulging in clandestine parties where the Charleston was still danced, albeit with a slightly more cautious shuffle. After all, one didn't want one's carefree dance moves to upend a chandelier in front of politely judicious company. Gatsby himself would find these soirees rather subdued. The glinting candelabras might have been significantly less gilded, and the champagne fountains perhaps slightly more shallow. But there they were, elegant gatherings that whispered decadence at quarter volume. Oh yes, the cocktails still flowed, but their recipes were altered in accordance with prohibition's lingering shadow. These genteel hosts, firm clutchers of inherited wealth, managed to maintain a few comforts that bordered on extravagance. Take, for instance, the curious case of Fanny Turtlebaum, a woman renowned not only for her ability to arrange flowers with the seriousness of a military strategist, but equally for her penchant to import rare cheeses that suggested an altercation with a favorable exchange rate. You see, in an era where Swiss meant a currency before a cheese, Fanny's galas boasted a platter of Gruyere with more aspirations than a Broadway understudy. These gatherings became fashionable places to discuss critical issues of the day, like which relative's stock watching had been most convincingly performed while actually napping. Of course, luxury took less outward forms as well. The humble bathtub emerged as a bastion of hedonism, with some wealthy households finding solace in the comforting embrace of a good soak. While hot water was rationed like pearls from a frugal oyster, a few inventive souls discovered the art of bathroom exclusivity. Here, the tiny rubber duck became a mark of opulence, not its make, but purely its presence. Consider Fletchley P. Grunthorne IV, who found relaxation amidst the pop and fizz of bubbles atop his silver clawfoot bathtub. Though one could argue whether his bubbles came more from an ancient family heirloom or a vivacious champagne. His preference for the latter was never confirmed, just as his annual expenditure on bath salts remained a fiercely guarded mystery. And let's not forget the allure of wardrobes, where personal style played a quiet rebellion against the backdrop of necessity. Silk, even if smuggled with the caution reserved for a prized spy, was the fabric of choice. Corsetry, subtly loosened, spoke of an era longing for freedom, yet clinging to structure, much like an amateur fisherman celebrating a fish that got away. These luxuries, the dances, the cheeses, the peculiar bath rituals, offered an escape from the austerity pressing in from the edges of their manicured lawns. Yet, it was this very contrast that made such indulgences appear almost comical, like a fine opera playing to an audience more interested in the intermission snacks. As the winds of the Depression continued to blow both dust and uncertainty across the land, those with the means to do so found solace in these secret luxuries. Whether it was the subtle glint of a pearl necklace at a dinner party or the discreet pleasure of velvet slippers, these indulgences provided a soft cocoon against the harsh world outside. So as you drift off tonight, imagine yourself cradled in the plushness of a silk pillow, lulled by the quiet hum of a gramophone and the glow of 1,000 candles, each flicker a wink from an era that, despite its challenges, knew precisely how to cling to comfort with a wink and a nod. With our imaginations thus ensconced in these silky sheets of history, could any dreamland seem more inviting? Let us prepare to gently wander further back down this ornate corridor, where the next whispered secret of yesteryear awaits. As the dust settled upon the Great Plains, and the echoes of jazz filtered through hidden speakeasies, the wealthy of the Great Depression were not above finding innovative ways to preserve their element of elegance. While the average American adjusted their tastes to soup lines and modest dinners, there existed an elite cadre determined to cling to their luxurious past, even if it meant keeping the odd peacock to trim their lawns. Imagine, dear listener, a time when lavish estates lined with marble columns stood in stark contrast to the lean bread lines that wound through city streets. A time where opulent garden parties were hosted on manicured lawns as gas lamps twinkled like fireflies trapped in amber. These were the shadowed luxuries, tucked away behind thick hedges of old money and discretion. One particularly peculiar indulgence was the clandestine tradition of the hollow wall banquets. Wealthy hosts, determined to keep the spirit of the grand feast alive, devised ingenious mechanisms to hide expansive dining rooms behind sliding panels. Guests would gather for what appeared to be humble, sinky gatherings, only to be whisked away through secret doors into lavish feasts reminiscent of the roaring 20s. Champagne flowed unabated, not from bottles but through silver fountains concealed in pianos, their melodious plinks and plonks serving as both entertainment and excuse for second helpings of roast pheasant. For entertainment, imagine small but exquisite theatre performances. Hidden within lush libraries with shelves full of first editions, actors would emerge from nowhere, performing pithy renditions of Shakespeare or Cole Porter's latest. The room itself might be an illusion crafted by the renowned illusionist Harry Houdini, who, let's just say, left some of his secrets behind for those who could afford them. Then there were the whisper repositories. Yes, you heard that right. These were places where members of the elite exchanged tantalizing gossip, wrapped around fragrant hibiscus teas and demure silk fans to muffle the sound, their lips speaking softly of new Parisian fashions and the latest Picasso discovery. These secret exchanges might have seemed frivolous then, but they were, in truth, the Twitter threads of their day. Viral gossip that flitted through social circles faster than you could say, depression chic. Now, any discussion on rich escapism during the Great Depression would be incomplete without mentioning hobbies of odd charm and one-upmanship. Picture, if you will, opulent bathtubs carved from solid Italian marble, filled with imported spring water because why not? Or how about perfectly heated and person-sized chambers, just for the pleasure of growing orchids year-round, a testament not just to wealth, but horticultural hubris. Meanwhile, other secret indulgences bordered on the bizarre, like the aromatic spice syndicates. With the world economy plummeting, certain spices became as rare as diamonds. Saffron squads sprinted through shadowed city underbellies like operatives from a pulp novel. Dictation collars, buzzing with coded messages about the next cumin drop. Ah, such adventures they wove in pursuit of flavor. And let's not forget the peculiar pastime of ceiling fame, where the wealthy hired artists to paint dazzling interpretations of their likenesses among the celestial, cherubic figures of themselves reclined upon clouds of gold leaf. If you craned your neck in the right Manhattan parlors, you'd swear the Rockefeller family was Zeus's direct descendant. After all, what could be more sleep-inducing than being watched over by your own painted angel self? As slumber gently wraps its arms around you, imagine this last silent luxury, an endless library, deep in the heart of an old manor, its pinewood panels groaning with the wisdom of the ancients. In these hallowed spaces, the wealthy whispered tales of distant travels and unwritten histories, the kind only revealed to those who dared to dream beyond the Dust Bowl. Perhaps it is time to close this chapter of hidden opulence, a soft breath of nostalgia nuzzling into the pillow of time. For as we drift into the final reveal, we learn that perhaps the greatest luxury, then as now, is the freedom to dream. Now, dear listener, Allow the rhythmic cadence of history and luxury to cradle you further into your night as chapter 24 awaits to unfurl. As the sun cast its final golden glow over the dust-laden streets and slumber beckoned the bustling minds of the 1930s to rest, the rich of the Great Depression era were not immune to the anxieties of the world outside. Yet, in their secretive havens, a peculiar brand of luxury, quietly tucked away, provided a comforting embrace against the harsh whimsy of fate. Imagine, if you will, the clandestine opulence that existed behind tightly drawn curtains, where dreams paved their paths in silken slippers, and counters remained full while others crumbled into scarcity. Tonight, we step into a ballroom as hushed as a whisper, hanging in suspended time. World around might have been spinning in financial distress, but inside, a new kind of gathering unfolded, one where the dress code was as elaborate as the ingenuity used to conceal such gatherings. Each guest had been instructed to arrive not dressed in gossamer gowns, but rather in the guise of casual servants or musicians, a humorous caper in itself. Who knew that being faceless in one's own time, being one with the shadows, could become a badge of exclusivity? Waltzing across the floor, the well-to-do wove tapestries of gossip spun their quips as delicately as spider silk. But what truly defined these clandestine affairs wasn't the opulence that these individuals seemed to ostentatiously forgo, but rather their agreed conspiracy to treat hardship with theatrical aplomb. When life handed them lemons, they not only made lemonade, they insisted on adding a splash of contraband gin, purely for medicinal purposes, of course. Idle chatter with a splash of sparkle became an art form unto itself. Conversations flowed like a languid river, drifting into tales of rare indulgences that transcended mere material wealth. The humor was dry, much like their martinis. "What is a luxury, really?" pondered one gentleman in an exquisitely disheveled state, "when one has mastered the art of sneaking steam for a bath." But luxurious baths were only the beginning. Hidden within these gatherings lay culinary marvels that might leave even the most sleep-deprived insomniac intrigued. Consider, if you will, the decadent chocolate cake concocted from beans smuggled in rice sacks beneath the unsuspecting nose of hardship. Each delicious slice was a secret, whispered with every mischievous bite, a culinary wink that defied the era's gloom. The linchpin of this covert luxury was none other than the family vault, repurposed by many into makeshift theatres, or more quaintly, tea rooms, complete with a resident tabby, snoozing luxuriously on velvet cushions. Here in these secluded corners, one could find everything from cactus jam to bourbon-soaked cherries, treasured like gems in a pirate's chest, hidden beneath trapdoors and secret panels. Indeed, the rich became rather adept raconteurs of their own resourcefulness, each story more outlandish and delightful than the last. As night deepened, a sense of timeless peace fell over these discreet oases of plenty. The rooms ebbed into silence, the musical clinking of teacups hushed, and the ghost of laughter echoed softly, curling through the dim-lit corridors like a beloved bedtime tale. For in these spaces, they spun their own magic against the cold logic of the world's woes. So, dear listener, as you nestle deeper into the warm embrace of your own blankets, consider the secret indulgences these walls once held. Let your mind drift into the tranquility of those bygone soirees. Luxuriate in the whisper of hidden histories that tell of human resilience meshed artfully with charm, where even the act of sleeping felt like a generous luxury bestowed. With each breath, sink a little further into the softness of your sleep, a century's worth of secrets lightly resting on the edge of your dreams, waiting to nod you softly into slumber. Here, in the calm twilight, we end our tale, tucking it gently into the safe cocoon of night. Sweet dreams and restful oceans of serenity await you as the era softly fades into a gentle, lulling memory.